rations, and everything is going to be all right. Well, a few bands then listened, began to come back in quietly. And one of the last bands to come in was Bigfoot. And he was on his way to the Pine Ridge Agency. Now, your Pine Ridge Agency, you see, is down below. Sitting Bull was killed up here at Standing Rock, and Pine Ridge is down here in the southern part of South Dakota. So he was on his way from the Badlands, coming into Pine Ridge to surrender. And he ran into the 7th Cavalry. He jumped out of his wagon, went over to the commanding officer with a big smile on his face. He was so happy to get in out of the cold, he just wanted to get back on the reservation. He didn't want any warfare. He said no, he didn't want it. He didn't care for it. So they said, get back. He was suffering from pneumonia, as a matter of fact, the old man was. He was on a bed in this wagon. So they told him to get back in the wagon, and they'd escort him in. Well, it was all very peaceful. And then word came to Colonel Forsyth, who was the colonel of the 7th Cavalry at the time, to halt, make camp, and disarm all of these Indians before they brought them in to the Pine Ridge Agency. Well, he gave his order, made the rule, pitch your camp, and the soldiers, of course, surrounded it. They're going to disarm these Indians. Now, the Indians are pretty scared. They don't know what is going to happen. They went into council, and there was one Indian, a medicine man there, who didn't believe that these white men meant what they said when they ordered them to bring in their arms. And he told them just to bring in a few. So they brought in some old muzzle-loading guns and one thing and another, but all their high-powered rifles, their repeating rifles, they kept and had hidden. They surrounded the camp, and no one will ever know how it all happened. But this medicine man, Yellowgrass, just threw a handful of dirt in the air, someone fired a shot, and then the shooting took place on all sides. The Indians started shooting out of the teepees. The troops who were surrounded the camp just poured volley after volley into that camp. And up on the hill that commanded the entire camp, and there was a ravine on one side of it. And the Indians tried to rush to get into that ravine. But up on this hill, as I say, was a battery of Hotchkiss guns. They were a rapid-firing gun that fired explosive shells under Captain Capron. And Capron opened up with his Hotchkiss guns on these Indians, and as they went down into the ravine, all they wanted to do was escape and get up that ravine. And you know that some of those Indians were killed a mile away from that camp, up that ravine. Men, women, children, they were all just mowed down. And then came the blizzard. A great blizzard set in, swept down across the wounded knee, and it just buried everything beneath its touch. And Big Bat, the great old scout, Baptiste Poiret, when I went over that field with him, he said, it was pitiful. He said, I just wept. Women, children, dead. Some women dead, and their babies, the little ones, wrapped in their shawls, still alive, under the snow. And there were Indians still wearing the ghost shirts, wounded, knowing they were going to die, pulling the ghost shirts off them, chanting their death songs, and he said it was the most pitiful thing I've ever seen. Well, this blizzard set in, and the troops went back into their camps, and what was left of the Indians who didn't get away were just buried beneath the snow. After the storm was over, the white soldiers went out. They dug one great long grave and put all of these Indians into it. And one of the pitiful pictures was old Bigfoot himself, who was practically dying of pneumonia, who only wanted peace, who only wanted to come back and be friends again with the white men. And here he was lying in the snow, a frozen corpse. Well, that put an end to the dancing. There's no dancing after that. But the songs remained in the Indian's heart. The songs of the ghost dance, just a pitiful cry for help. It was, "Father, have pity on us. We're hungry. We have nothing to eat. We're cold. We have no fires to warm us. Father, have pity on us, for now we have nothing left to believe in." That picture is an epilogue to the story of the ghost dance I've just told you. You know, after the Wounded Knee, all attention was centered on the Battle of Wounded Knee, the killing of Sitting Bull, but no one seemed to think anything about who started all this. The Messiah was forgotten, if they ever knew about him. Of course, the authorities knew about him, but the general public didn't. And so he just sort of went underground, disappeared. He didn't want to have anything to do with that trouble. And of course, the Indians sort of covered his tracks. The result was that he became a lost man. Nobody knew where he was. Nobody cared, I guess. And then, since I knew so many of those Indians who had gone down as the emissaries, the disciples that went down to bring back the ghost dance, I got interested. What happened to the Messiah? And I determined one time to find out. I asked General Scott about it one time. Scott said he didn't know where he was. He said after the ghost dance died, "Don't know what happened to this fellow." Well, I said, "I'm going to find him. I'm going to run him down. I'm going to find his trail." Now, I have talked to so many of these Indians, like Yellow Calf, Sage, Short Bull, and they all seem to agree on one thing. Since then, of course, people have said, "Oh, he was a great faker, and all he did was he was a medicine showman, not a medicine man, and he was a great faker." We think that he didn't believe in it. So what the Indians told me led me to believe that this man was quite sincere in his beliefs. They said that when we went out to visit him, we were in his house, he lay down on the floor, and he died. He said, "We felt his pulse. We listened to his heart. He didn't have any heartbeat. He had no pulse. He was dead." Then after a while, he came up again, came alive, and told us the vision he'd had, that he talked to the Great Spirit. The Great Spirit had given him these songs and that dance, and told him that he must show it, must give it to all the Indians so that this great miracle would happen one day. They were all sincere in their belief, too. Well, that made me think that maybe this fellow had something that people didn't realize, that the man was sincere. So I began on a still hunt. It took me a long time, but from one tribe to another, I tried to figure out, where do I find this fellow? Where is he? And inquiring a bit here and there, because the Indians, you couldn't get any information from them at all, if any of them knew. But bit by bit, I picked up his trail and followed it clear down until I found him way down on the border of California and Nevada on the Pyramid Lake Reservation. It was winter. That picture you saw was taken in the snow. And I had quite a time digging him out. Well, I got a hold of him, and then when he knew that I wasn't just some man trying to get his story or a newspaper reporter, but that I knew all of those disciples that had come to see him, so many of them anyway, and understood, why, he sort of opened up and warmed up to me. And he told me things that led me to believe that the man was sincere. I asked him, how did this whole thing start? What started you on this ghost dance? Well, he said, as a young man, he wasn't very strong. He said he was sort of sickly. And one day he was working, and he died. And he went up and saw the Great Spirit. And the Great Spirit said, I'm going to give you strong medicine, and you take down and give it to all the Indians. Everybody must live in peace, shake hands, be friends, believe in God. Now, I think what happened to him is that he had confused the teachings of Christianity that he'd received from missionaries along with the Indian mysticism, and he had it all mixed up in his head. But he said the Great Spirit gave him these songs, gave him this dance, and that he was to bring it down. The Great Spirit said long time ago that he'd sent his son down to the earth, but these white men had killed him. That's where he got mixed up with his Christianity, you see. The white men had killed his son. Now he's going to give this medicine to this Indian and send him down to the Indians, and that he should spread it out among all of them. He would be the Messiah. So he said he came back down to earth and began telling the Indians about this great medicine. Now, I'm sure that he believed it. He felt it in his heart. He thought that that was all right. I asked him about the ghost shirts, and he said no. He never told them about these ghost shirts, but some of those Sioux who had come to see him had taken stories back that he had never told them. And much of this trouble, now whether he was just trying to deny the trouble, I will never know. But he said that he had nothing to do with those ghost shirts, that that was a Sioux idea, and that he had no thought that bullets would not pierce those shirts. In fact, he didn't want to have anything to do with bullets. He was a man of peace. All he wanted was friendship. And that's what he tried to preach to his people. And that was his great belief. As I say, I trailed him around, found him down there in the snow in Pyramid Lake. I talked to him for quite some time about these things. He still believed in that religion. But he said, unfortunately, the Sioux had carried it too far and brought about this great battle, which, of course, it put an end to all the ghost dancing. But he firmly believed in all the things that the Great Spirit had told him. And not only that, but the astonishing thing to me was that he said he was never going to die. He'd die? No. He'd never die. That he was going to live on and on and on. And this picture that I had taken several years later, to me seems rather pitiful. But here was a man who firmly believed that his medicine was so strong, that it had been given him by the Great Spirit, that he would live on forever. And I think the sad part of the whole thing is that here I had this one picture, the only picture, as a matter of fact, that was ever made of him at that time. There's probably one that's used more than any other Indian picture that I know of, but he hadn't been photographed with any white men then. When he was alive and was sure that he would never die, and then the end of the story, I feel, is here I am standing beside his grave up in Yerington, Nevada, the end of the Messiah who thought he was never going to die, but didn't realize, couldn't understand that there were laws governing human beings that he didn't know.